So, well, it's great to be talking to you as always, Jane. I love connecting with you. And
Thank you.
this notion that our life is our practice. Um, I just think that it's more and more, you hear more and more encouragement from teachers, writers, authors to just look within and see what life is trying to teach you rather than, oh, today my practice is rigidly this.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are beginning to see that because we've got millions of practices of different variations on meditation and body work and mental work, spiritual work, and the practices are out there, but we're overloaded with that. But it's rather sneaky. You can do a practice and think, oh, I'm being a worthy person and I'm actually doing my practice, so I must be all right. And then separate that from your everyday life with what you're thinking. And I see that, I've seen it for myself. I could say I observe it in others, and I observe people also who actually they are the practice. They, as individuals, are the practice. Can I observe my thoughts, not neurotically, really just speaking about my own experience, that if I sort of go, hang on a minute, that's not good thinking, it's not about that, it's just noticing. Noticing how I feel when in my body and myself when I say certain things. And it will always tell me that I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable or slightly out of sync when I'm not being true to myself. And it's very easy to police yourself in one way. Yes, and I think, I mean, these are all my own observations. It's the only thing we can go by, to be honest. And you can tell by how you feel and how life is. It's going to feed back to you, in a sense. Everything that's unfolding in yourself will then appear at some stage outside. Not, as an obvious thing, but when you get attuned to it, you can have more awareness and you can choose to is I mean, in my um, practice of Course in Miracles, which I was very intensely doing in the 90s and the early 2000s, there is another way of seeing this. I find that the various practices that I have perhaps become more attached to over my fairly long life, there's always elements of each one of those that inform me as I am today. So nothing's
Mm.
lost, nothing.
No, I like that. And also, I mean, I've been concerned for a number of years with that dichotomy or even just the felt sense of contradiction between dedicated time where we practice, where people might feel more free, or they might feel that they are, releasing trauma, whether it's a physical practice like yoga, or even just exercise, or gardening, or sitting quietly in meditation, or meeting with a group, all of these things that we do. And then I know I have felt this, and I know lots of people also feel it. And you're kind of alluding to it there by this idea of having it separate from, we think of it mentally as separate, but that we can maybe achieve states of comfort or peace or bliss or happiness or just improvement in life during the times that we're so-called practicing. And then there's that feeling of that, but then ordinary life begins. Oh, but then I go home and, the kids and my husband is there, or, but then I go to work and where has all of that serenity gone then? That, so that's why I like what you're saying, because we have this incredible feedback material right here all the time, like it never goes. That life is constantly kind of dialoguing with us, really, or relating to us, responding to what we're giving.
Absolutely. It's sort of one and the same. It seems separate, but it's a process that we're going through in every split second of our lives. Now, well, I did that. I did certain things that I thought this is going to fix me, like
Yeah.
following gurus and sitting not literally at their feet, well, maybe some, and thinking, why do I still feel the same as I did before?
Well,
So,
that's interesting, actually, Jane. I wonder if we could just, because it might be interesting, certainly, I think, for our viewers, um, to talk a little bit about how all of this began for you, because you have, I mean, I know you personally, but lots of people won't necessarily know the huge breadth of experience that you've had around spiritual practices. You mentioned Course in Miracles, gurus, leaders, groups. I mean, you've had such a huge, varied experience, and that might be interesting for some people to hear about.
Because I'm actually sort of quarter of a way through writing my memoirs, because somebody suggested I've lived in 33 places in my life, which is rather a lot. So and I think you know this, Mike, that when I was very young, around the age of 4, I did have an experience that never left me in walking in the beech woods in Buckinghamshire.
Mm.
I was, and as I've been writing my memoir, remembering how difficult it was growing up with a brother who was actually autistic, but in the period I grew up, that hadn't been discovered. So he was a difficult child,
Mm.
and it was totally disruptive. He was older than me, and I used to escape. My mother was a headmistress of the village school, and I used to escape down to the beech woods and play. There weren't all those things about strangers in cars in those days, and we were a little bit freer. And one day, there's a sort of, I was looking at the beech trees, and there was suddenly a light appeared, and I can only describe it like that. It was like the trees lit up,
Mm.
and a voice sort of said, "This isn't your home," meaning Earth. And it's very interesting because I've looked at that later and thought, well, it is my home, but what they were saying was, this isn't your eternal home. And that's how I've interpreted it later.
Mm.
And it made me feel, I remember as that young child, this warm glow inside me that I'd been given a gift. Um, of course, you can't interpret it at that age. There's nothing to say. Um, and I did go home and tell my mother, and I'd had this thing, and I called it angels singing, but I have no idea. That bit I don't know. But she said, "Oh, well, that's nice, dear," and of course didn't rubbish it. So it stayed with me throughout my life as things have unfolded. I've never felt quite comfortable in my skin or in the world, and I have always looked for other ways of making myself feel okay, and that comes sometimes by just by experience of life. But quite early on, my parents were both avid seekers, and my mother used to drag me off to some spiritual summer school with her where all the kids played, so it was in my DNA.
Mm.
But I was aware of Krishnamurti early on, and it always struck me then that there wasn't a practice as such that you did something outside to feel better. Practice is just to be observant of what you're thinking, and how you become prescriptive around it. And is it possible to be free and not be living from the ideas in your head? Well, of course, in practice, that is extremely difficult. And
Mm.
I will say that because you forget all the time. We just carry on and live life. And so I have, apart from that, I did quite early on. I was thinking, just think about it. Krishnamurti was somebody I used to carry his book around with me, The First and Last Freedom. Then later, after my sort of opera singing days had stopped, I got into a lot of trouble in myself, as one does, and not sure what to do. And I went through a phase of trying rebirthing, which was kind of, you couldn't really call it a spiritual practice, but it was a way of feeling you might find some release. And that led to somebody telling me about the Course in Miracles. And I think I might have started reading it around that time. I can't remember. And then I think I dallied with it. And then I took it seriously because a lot of things fell apart in my life completely. And that is generally the time when we really take it seriously. And it just centered me. I can't really, there's far more I'd want to say about it, but it brought me back to a sense of who I am on a deeper level, and took me away from the neuroses of being a human being. I mean, you can keep it in control and it might not seem so, but at any moment there is that neurosis ready to break out. So I worked with the course for a long time, and I got very involved with exploring it deeply in a particular group in America, and it certainly helped me enormously at that time, But then it also showed me that you can't escape yourself. I've got a term, you can't subtract yourself from yourself. That when you try and get away from yourself, which is very, very tempting, that you still meet yourself again at some point very quickly. You bump back in, you bump into yourself and you go, oh God, am I still here? Our life is our practice in every moment. So latterly, I have gone back much more to what Krishnamurti says. I'm seeing it now from a more mature perspective that it's you can do yoga. I do Tai Chi. I practice Tai Chi and Qigong. They both center me and make me feel right, ready for the day. It's more just help needed in every moment of your life, in a sense that helps you through certain times. I love walking. Walking is a spiritual practice for me. Perhaps because of my beech tree experience, that is where I gain my deepest solace and my deepest sense of peace. I think meditation is fine, but I'm not very good at meditation. I'll put my hand up and say, in a way, that's it. It's other people, it will be perfect for them.
We all learn from each other, and it's so easy for us to be thinking, oh, I'm no good, I don't have any good spiritual practices, or I'm no good at meditation, for example, is one I hear all the time. And yet, when you talk about what you do as part of your ordinary life, I mean, first of all, there's this incredible wealth of experience that you've had studying, I mean, and listening to teachers and meeting others and being in groups where others are interested in similar things, which I would say are important. They're not going to necessarily be the magic, solution that we need.
But
But
they're
I,
part of the journey,
but they're
yes.
part of the journey, exactly. But I think it is helpful to think of simply walking as a
Yes,
spiritual practice,
yes. And
looking
running
at
as well.
trees and
Running.
being with nature and allowing nature to commune with us, and for us to commune with it is a
Yes.
spiritual practice. Simple things like Tai Chi, Qigong, any kind of body practice. I mean, I think that oftentimes, I mean, you and I have quite often been in the exact same rooms where we've been exploring with other seekers. And there is this temptation often for us to get stuck in our heads, isn't there? We know that's, and certain types of communication appeal to the intellect more than they do to the body. So something I've certainly noticed in the years that I've been, more directly involved in this kind of work is that that is a tide that's changing, that there's much more emphasis on embodied practices. So I do think that's very helpful for people to hear, because it's just so easy for us to think, I'm not doing that. Whereas, I mean, we've had conversations many times where we can think of people in our lives. I can think of several in my own family who would never describe themselves as spiritual in any way at all. And yet some of the things that they do in their ordinary life are effectively spiritual practices.
Absolutely.
They just think of it as something that they enjoy, or just something that's always worked for them.
That's the problem. And that's what one of Krishnamurti's famous quotes is: the word is not the thing.
Mm,
If you look on it as life flowing, which I know one hears over and over again, but it is that. It's just in every
mm,
moment. But that isn't something you can grasp. It's nothing. It's just like you've got to open up your hands and let it all go. I have followed gurus. I was involved with, maybe two two major in my life gurus as such, and I'm not going to name them, it's not relevant, but one of them became a fallen guru, and it was the end of my guru following. And
mm.
people I know will be curious to know who that is, but there are quite a few out there, so I'm not going to identify him as such. But I can see when I look back that I needed to do that in order to lead me to this point. There isn't a guru who's not, when they're in physical form, who won't have some issue that you know will be his downfall, her downfall. It's just things can lead you to see that a lot of that seeking can be an avoidance of going into a deeper space in yourself.
Mm.
Like you feel you can paste something that someone else is telling you onto you. Well, you can't. You
Yeah.
simply can't do it.
Mm.
But that is, don't go by what I say. It is an experience that you come to.
No, I completely agree. And it feeds in, doesn't it, to that part of our, conditioning that thinks that, well, I'm no good. I can't do it on my own. I need that validation from outside of
Yeah.
myself, somebody to say, how am I doing?
Mm.
And you're right. I think that we can say that that doesn't work, but everybody has to discover that for themselves, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So,
So, the other thing that I'm interested to explore is this idea, or this fact, really, that we are constantly getting feedback from life, about what's working and what isn't. I mean, so some people who may be watching this might know that you and I worked together with a spiritual teacher helping Francis Bennett travel UK and Ireland and
mm,
share teachings. And something that Fran used to say was, which I always thought was really great when people were sort of explaining their sometimes complicated approaches. And she said to me many times, listen very, very kindly. And then, so how's that working for you?
mm.
So how is that working out for you? What effectively meaning, is it changing anything? And I think that's a useful point to make because, um, we do often pick up a spiritual practice or we want to live a more harmonious life because at the moment things aren't working, that we're coming from a place of wanting to change or transform, or even if we feel that we've maybe, I don't know, reached a place of harmony within ourselves, we might want to help others. We see that others that we love and care about are suffering, and so we may be called to help them. So I think it's quite interesting to ask ourselves every now and then, okay, so how is this working for me? Is my spiritual practice even helping? Is it having
Well,
a good
yeah,
change?
yeah. And um, I think something you said leapt out at me. We've reached a certain harmony. Well, that's the problem. We haven't reached it, and it's not fixed there. Even the idea that I have acquired this, it's a bit like, you get you pass your you go to university and you get a degree, and then, well, what does that mean? It's just letters
Mm,
after my name. So it is that's why I feel for myself that after much seeking and failing and thinking I was wrong or hadn't got it right, it's the recognition that it's just letting go of that idea of what right and wrong is. Was always very affected by some of the stories in the Bible, and one of them was Moses, who parted the waves for the Red Sea for the Israelites to go over, go through. And I feel that's always a metaphor for how we're able to see the weight of the water on either side of us ready to crash down, but keep walking through. Again, words are always a problem in a way because they're trying to describe something that's almost indescribable.
a crisis situation happens, in a real world situation. I mean, for example, the fact that you've moved home so many times that sometimes something's happened, you hadn't planned it, you've got to find somewhere else to live. And that's happened 33 times, you were saying, in your life, which is a lot for a person to have to move. And sometimes suddenly, sometimes perhaps in a more deliberate way. There'll be this, like the water crashing in, the sort of pressure of life coming in, and then you'll do something like accept you can't control it, surrender, or take yourself on a long walk, or say, actually, sitting here trying to solve the problem and moving the pieces around on the chessboard isn't working. So I'm just going to accept that I can't do it, and I'm going to go and spend the afternoon in the woods.
And I do think that at some point in our lives that we do have an experience that opens us up to other, and more people have that than probably realize they have. It's something to refer to in order to remind yourself to be present. It's not, oh, I'm awake and I had an awakening and that's it.
Mm.
And we aspire to try to make this experience as perfect as we can, and we have no idea what perfection means. I feel so, as I would say, and as I just said probably earlier, life is my guru. It shows me where I'm at, and I will talk to myself. I live on my own, so I can every right
Same.
to. If we're
mm.
looking to have a life that's squeaky clean and nothing's going wrong, we are really in problems. Like I can't help thinking, I have to mention it. I was always amused in The Life of Brian, where they disturb this man who's been meditating for 21 years without speaking, and he comes out absolutely raging.
Yeah.
And I think those guys, I mean, as much as at the time it was very shocking, but really highlighted some of the issues around, worshipping things and feeling, can't avoid this life.
We're in a human body. We're humans. We get lonely. We get frightened. We get scared. And so there's this impulse to not have that experience. And yet we're frequently reminded, actually, the mess is okay. Imperfection is part of the deal. It's all right. You're not going to get rid of it. Just looking at the chaos of a life, and accepting that, well, actually, it's part of the deal. That there are going to be times when we have good days and bad days, and the sun can't shine forever, and all that those sort of attitudes. It helps. I think to look and see, yeah, the things aren't the way I want them to be always, but that's okay. Because linking in with what you're saying about perfection, and that life has, I do believe that there's this inherent wisdom, but the wisdom is one that embraces the chaos.
You mentioned, I know we both had an experience of cancer. I'd forgotten about that. In a way, I would also say cancer became a guru for a while. It showed, why me? Oh, all of that stuff. And
Mm,
immediately, the opposite came in, why not me?
mm,
And the minute that I realized I had that thought,
mm.
it empowered me.
Yeah.
And mine is, it's a long time ago, as yours is, too. We've always got that possibility. And
Mm,
it doesn't mean to say that I don't get those little frissons of fear and things. We're just human. But
mm,
you know that if something happened, you would deal with it. You'd be held, as I call it, whether it's you held by God or spirit or life or the universe, whatever you want to call it. But there is something other. And I like that word, other.
mm.
It's just not, you can't capture it. You can't capture that other. And we just want to bring it down to earth.
The interesting thing is, when we do allow that other, or the realm of spirit, or so out, at the Hamblin Vision, Henry Hamlin would refer to God, but he'd use words like otherness as well, and entering the silence and surrendering and letting things flow and letting things be. But that moment when we do let it in, it's like we are it does embody us. Then we are so we're expressions of it for those moments, and when things flow, it's like a dance, isn't it?
And also, I have no problem with the word God at all, or the terminology. It's just, I think, yes, a lot of people do have a problem. It doesn't matter what they call it, is what I would say.
Mm,
I mean, interestingly, I was brought up as a Quaker, and it was against all of the pomp and circumstance of
mm,
organized religion.
mm,
And I think because of having been brought up in that milieu, I never had the baggage, in the sense, forgive me, anyone who said it's not baggage as such, but I didn't have that to refer to. I've come to
mm.
see how important ritual is for a lot of people, and how
Yeah,
powerful it is if you
yeah.
really use it with the right way, and not just literally as a mindless ritual. That's not going to
Mm,
do any good. But also, I saw through. I left the Quakers when I was quite young. I went to Quaker boarding school because I saw the principle of it was, when it was started, was that you would get up and speak because the Holy Spirit was speaking through you. And I love that idea. And yet, of course, when it boiled down to it, people would just stand up and say, yes, well, they're going to put a new road on the byway and we're trying to stop them doing that. Or, I've noticed, and it would be so small and human that for me in that stage, I wanted that immanence, and I didn't get it. Just that a lot of things get reduced down when you follow, when you become when you call it an ism, rather than you're actually going, well, what's the heart of Catholicism? What's the heart of Quakerism? And there you find it.
but what you say then about being still. I mean, I've been to a few Quaker meetings, but in later life, and found them very helpful. And I think that that's true. I think that it can be very tempting, to just make those holy moments mundane. But also, I think what's good about that, and what I think is often, I suppose, sometimes rejected without too much consideration when we walk away from, you know, faith communities or religious communities, is actually the community aspect of it. There's something really special about being with others and coming together in a shared understanding that is difficult to replicate. You know, it's the being among others that people really like. You know, I mean, yes, there's a framework that is facilitating a good coming together and you know, a safe space and healthy interactions and so on. But you often find, don't you, that it's when people share together that they really feel uplifted, because we are social human
Yeah,
beings.
absolutely. And I remember that time at when we were doing a retreat with Francis, gosh, it's about 9 years ago now. Um, and one of the great things, because Francis came from a Trappist monk background, there was an element that was built in or become a habit of profound silence. And
Mm.
so when we did and maybe an hour's meditation, in other words, just sitting in silence, I remember it was palpable. And when we opened our eyes, there was a deer in the countryside. It was a feeling of being together in that experience, which I don't deny at all. I think it's wonderful. The great thing about retreats that you've got the time, perhaps if you go to a longer one, to actually feel into the energies of everybody. It's not going out and trying to look for that because you've lost it. Even in the midst of chaos, there's still small voices there.
Yeah.
And also often my reflections after being, I do go to the Krishnamurti Center for my sense of retreat. You know,
Mm.
it's not an official retreat, but the trees and the walks and everything else is glorious there, and the atmosphere is very welcoming and embracing. So yes, there are bits and pieces about that.
It's always lovely to connect with you. And for those of you watching, I hope you have found this in conversation, part of our series of practical spirituality here at the Hamblin Vision. I hope you have found it illuminating and interesting. If there's anybody that you would like me to interview, to have a conversation with for this series, please do write in. And as I say, if you would like to connect with Jane, her website is janemetcalfe.co.uk. And Jane, just remains for me to say thank you so much for sharing that
Right.
with me.
Right.
It's lovely to connect, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, definitely. Lots of
Thank
love.
you. God bless. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.